Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of August 12, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. My guest was Google employee number 2 in Canada, one of the first 500 in the entire company. Eric Morris, head of retail for Google, joins me in an exclusive live and interactive interview where we search for answers to the state of retail, how consumers are interacting online, and what's next for retailers from the Google Tickle-Trunk. Next, we head to the East Coast for a feature interview with RCC's Atlantic Director, Jim Cormier, coming to us straight from Halifax. We discuss the top issues for retailers located in or operating in the region as Jim works with the 4 provincial governments to align rules and regulations across the region, including environmental stewardship programs, plastic bags, and all kinds of other programs. Lastly, I'll take a look at retail news of the week, but first, let's listen to my interview with Eric Morris from Google Canada. Eric, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, thanks for joining me. You and I have known each other for a bunch of years. Had the pleasure of working with you and in conjunction with you. But for the listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal journey to how you got to Google, and what your role is there.
Great. Well, I joined Google 17 years ago. It's hard to believe. I joined in June of 2002.
Wait, what? Was there even a Google 17 years ago?
There was a Google 17 years ago. Wow. I joined as the second employee in Canada. Now the longest serving, but at the time the second employee in Canada. We had about 500 people at Google globally. And the company's revenue was about $300 million at the time. So it really was, a small business and a small startup at the time. I've had various leadership roles since joining. I've run our automotive practice, financial services practice. I launched our mobile ads business here in Canada, and most recently, over the last 2.5 years or so, running our retail practice, which is our largest industry of focus, where we spend the most time, energy, product innovation. My role specifically is to help retailers in Canada use Google technology to drive sales, and sales being online or sales being in store, and help build their brands. So we work with traditional retailers like a Walmart or Home Depot. We work with a lot of online-only businesses like an Essence in Montreal, luxury retailer, Clearly Contacts in Vancouver, Part Select in Halifax would be a couple examples of those. We work with direct-to-consumer retailers like a Lululemon or a Canada Goose. And we also work with some Canadian companies that are building like the retail infrastructure for the world, like a Shopify or a Lightspeed. So that's sort of my mandate, is to help all of those companies use Google technology to build their business. They're based in Canada. Many of them have customers in Canada. Many of them are trying to sell in the U.S. And globally. And that's what I do.
You know, it's funny, when I was at HBC, I remember Darren coming to me and saying, we should try this new Google search thing. And he said, it's a bit funky. Like, it seems like a bunch of college kids running search, because at the time we were on Yahoo and all this stuff. And then I said, all right, let's give it a try. And man, how it's changed in the past 17, 18 years. It's really phenomenal. And of course, when you talk about working with retailers, these are the retailers at different scales that you work with, but retailers of all sizes, I'm sure, continue to use Google, whether it's locally or self-serve. It's just a revolution in how people and e-commerce operators drive traffic, right? It's really, when you think about it, I remember I launched the first e-commerce site for Levi Strauss, and we were just sitting there waiting for an order to come in. You really had no way to prime the pump, right? And it's funny, you forget about those days, right?
No, it's incredible. And look, I love what I do. And I think in when you run a business for a company, or you're in a sales or business development part of an organization, I think there's a lot of people who sell products that are undifferentiated, or they don't work, or you're not sure if they work. And I think one of the most amazing things about advertising with Google is that it always works. For retailers, if they have a product that they're looking to sell, if they're trying to drive people to a store, Google is very, very effective at harnessing that intent. People are coming to Google looking for that product, that service, that store, and we are that matchmaker, that connection point. And, it's amazing for businesses like big or small. We work with, as you said, a lot of smaller businesses who are really doing it on their own. And then we work with like large large enterprises who are selling online, selling in store. They have hundreds of stores. They are managing the inventory and the ads to match up to like what they have in individual stores. And so working with retailers big and small, retailers looking for something really simple and turnkey, and others looking for something far more complicated and robust for their enterprise and what they need to run a large business.
So you were on the main stage at Retail Council of Canada Store 2019 with your friends at Deloitte. You did a study. So let's talk about the study for a little bit, future-proofing your business. So tell us a bit about the study, how it came about, why you did a study, because there's no shortage of data out there, but tell us why you did the study and a little bit about it.
So I think we did it for a couple of reasons. I've gotten to know Jen Lee at Deloitte quite well. And, I think the origins of this study, I think there's, a few interesting data points. I think as Canadians and Canadian businesses, we are starved for information about our market. And there's no shortage of global studies or studies about the U.S. market specifically, but it's actually really, really hard to find Canadian-specific insights about what shoppers are doing and how retailers should adapt. So we wanted to create something really interesting and insightful, unique to the Canadian market that answers the questions that retail executives have here. We spend at Google a lot of time working with retail marketers and executives, as does Deloitte. We're both trying to do the same thing, which is help retailers grow their business. We, of course, have different perspectives, consulting and professional services versus like marketing and technology. So we come from like different perspectives, but I think combined, we bring it's a better together story. So those were some of the things that we were trying to solve. And I think the study was trying to understand, how shopping has changed, what differences, if any, are there with shopping in the U.S. specifically. And I think more importantly, this is where the future proofing comes in. Given these insights and the research, what should a retailer do about it? Given what we know about the shopper today, what should you as a marketer, as a retail executive do about it? And that's the future proofing. That's where future proofing comes in. The study is available at thinkwithgoogle.com/futureproof. I believe that's the URL. I'm giving that because it may be easier to walk through charts and numbers as a PDF later. And
I'll put it in the show notes too. So I'll put a nice link to it so people can even refer to it as we chat about.
Perfect. And I'll say one other thing is, there are no shortage of stories about how retail is changing in Canada, in the U.S., and around the world. And I think certainly what we're seeing here at Google is there is a great divide between, the businesses and the retailers who are adapting to these changes well and can adapt and are realizing that these changes can drive growth and can actually help grow their business. So on one hand, you have retailers who are adapting well, and the changes are actually driving a lot of growth for them, where they provide better experiences for their shoppers and ultimately growing their retail business. And then there are retailers on the other side of the divide, where these changes are far more disruptive. They're having trouble making sense of it all, and it really does pose an existential threat. So these changes are a opportunity for opportunistic retailers, but also a threat for those who are not moving fast enough. And the future-proof component of the study is to help retailers make sense of it and provide a little bit of advice as to, given all of these changes with shopping today, what can we as a retailer do about it?
One of the numbers that jumped out at me, and there's lots of great numbers, so I'd really encourage everyone who can hear the sound of our voice to check the survey out, because it's really a good piece of work. Best in class spend 30% more on personalization. That jumped out at me. And I guess that's that digital divide. And you've got the opportunity to sit with retailers, I guess, on both sides of that chasm. And that's it's nice to put a number to that, right? That we talk about that notionally, that you must invest. But that number really stuck out for me. Did it jump out like that for you?
It did, and it's interesting. I think a lot of these insights may seem obvious to many people, obvious as a shopper, obvious as an executive. And in fact, part of the study, we actually interviewed Canadian retail executives and just asked them for feedback and what are they seeing? What are they seeing working well? Where do they see challenges? And they too spoke to personalization. So I think one of the neat things about the study is it quantifies a little bit things that people have been seeing, observing, and thinking about. So I think on personalization specifically, I think we all intuitively know this. The survey quantifies it, as you said, but I think when we think about, the best experiences that we have online today, whether it is Google Maps, knowing directions, helping you get from point A to point B, it certainly helps to know like where you are, places that you are more likely to go, sharing your location, of course, with permission. Netflix is a highly personalized experience. It's curated for you based on what you watch. Michael, you and I would not have the same Netflix experience if we were to both open our app now. It would be different based on the things we've watched and the things that they predict we are likely to watch next. So I think we know that the best digital experiences today are highly personalized, curated to what we're interested in, and shopping should be no different. I've shared this anecdote with you before. When I go to most retailers' websites in Canada, the homepage is the same for everyone, right? Whether I've shopped with you before, right? Whether or not, right? Whether I've bought patio furniture before or not, the homepages, the promotions, everything I see on that homepage is the same for Canadians across the country. Whereas there are, I think, a few retailers who do a very, very good job of a highly personalized digital experience where you go to the homepage and there are customized recommendations, offers, suggestions, curated based on the things that you are most likely to be interested in.
At least gang tackling, if they haven't got the one-to-one marketing, at least they're kind of, the better in class are starting to move towards that objective, right?
That's right. I think, look, one-to-one is really, really hard. And I think many retailers aspirationally want to get there. And I think if you have, what we would call rich first-party data, or you have a loyalty program or some other way of knowing where shoppers, when they've shared their preferences and their purchases before at point of sale or online, again, loyalty programs, there are other ways to do that. Of course, one-to-one is ideal. But as you said, there is a middle ground between like no personalization and one-to-one. I think that's where many retailers can be today. It's actually not that hard to do that, and there's lots of advice online on how do you curate, how do you make it just a little bit better. Sure. I think everybody wants to work towards sort of the perfect solution, and I think many tactics digitally, we can't let perfection be the enemy of the good. While we're working towards one-to-one marketing, which we think is perfect, let's try and not have the same homepage with everyone. Let's take into account location, things that products people have viewed before, preferences that people have explicitly given. Sure. They've given that to us because they want us as retailers and businesses to use that to give them a better experience.
One other thing, before we get to local, you mentioned Google Maps, so I want to talk about some insights in here about how much more people are searching local or near me. But one of the other things I just want to touch on, and you've said this multiple times in multiple conversations you and I have had, is speed, and speed matters. And you kind of tap on that again in this report. You didn't leave it alone. In other words, it's important how fast your site loads. Site performance still matters, and there's still work to be done there. Were you surprised to see that there hasn't been more progress on that side?
Well, I think this is an example of an insight that seems obvious to you and me. And I think if you were to ask retailers or executives, they of course would believe that, fast is better than slow. But I think what this study and other studies before have shown is just how important it is. 3 seconds, the difference between a 3 second or a 4 and 5 second load time doesn't seem like much to you and me. But when you are trying to buy something on your mobile device and time is of the essence, those precious seconds matter. And what we found at Google, surveying, I think it's 800,000 mobile websites around the world, and actually isolated retail specifically, is that for every second a site loads above and beyond 3 seconds, right, up to 20% of conversions can be lost because people are impatient or frankly they just give up. It's like losing Tuesday's sales.
It's big numbers, right? I
mean, it's big numbers.
It's big numbers, and it's it's for a different conversation for a different day. But you wonder if it's just built up expectations. But whatever it is, it's reality, right?
It's reality, and I think expectations are a big part of it. The reality is that everyone is holding us digitally to the best digital experience. So we are being held accountable to that Netflix personalized experience. The fact that today on my phone I can summon a car and have it arrive within like a minute or two and know exactly where I am and where I'm going. And that's the experience. And there are retailers who understand this. I mean, the best-in-class retailers in Canada, very large retailers in Canada, some of them, their websites load in like a second, 1.2 seconds. And you contrast that with other large retailers in Canada where their site is taking 5, 6, 7 seconds to load. It affects all sorts of things, the immediate sales lost, but also future sales lost. Why am I going to bother with a suboptimal digital experience when I can just defer to one that's the best? I mean, one of the most interesting insights, I think, from the survey is just how important that digital experience is. 90% of Canadians said that they are making decisions on what to buy and who to buy it from based on the digital experience. They're making decisions on what to buy online, and what to buy in store based on the quality of the digital experience. For most,
which is like a glass half full opportunity, right? In other words, you can still compete. There's some fundamentals where you can win and still win. And I love the report where it got into the, I've been many times spoken about there's no retail apocalypse, that physical stores still matter. And I was happy to see in your study you kind of said the same thing. Basically, the results were like stores matter. People want to go to stores. That connection still matters, and local still matters. So those two things jumped out at me again as important statistics that you put numbers to, and that's what I appreciated about the study.
Yeah, and again, it may sound obvious, and it can get lost in the retail apocalypse or some of the other narratives in the industry. But studies show that like 70% of Canadians want to shop locally, and it's great that a retailer can get you an item delivered to your door in a day or two, and many retailers can do that. But sometimes you want to get something in 10 or 15 minutes, and so there's an immediacy with shopping and an instant gratification, and not to mention the experience and the customer service.
Supporting your community, supporting the retailers that probably sponsor your kid's soccer team, all those things, right?
Exactly. I mean, that all goes into the equation. And so I think we all know, again, intuitively that local matters, being able to buy things locally and immediately matters. And again, the study put some numbers behind that, but of course the store is not going away. I think it impacts different retailers and different categories differently. I mean, as you know, retail in Canada, the stats can vary, but, call it around 8% of total retail sales occur online in Canada. Compare that with 10% in the U.S. So the gap is narrowing. It is a bit misleading because total retail sales, as we've talked about before, includes gas and groceries and flowers for your garden, some things that people really don't buy online or can't buy online. So in some ways, those stats understate the importance of the e-com channel. But
I think they do for the U.S. because I think when I look at the U.S. stats, I think of it more in the 16 to 17% number. Because and again, it's all what you base it on, right?
Yeah.
Strip out a bunch of stuff, and you start to get to some bigger numbers. But whatever it is, it's big and it's growing. So we could talk about what the percentage is, but it's somewhat academic at this point, right? Everyone knows it's the bigger opportunity.
That's right, and I think for a retailer to survive and thrive in Canada today, the reality is they have to do both. They have to find a way to grow their online channel, which for many of them is the fastest growing the portion of their business, and they also have to find a way to defend and grow their stores where the majority of the sales are occurring.
So again, I'll put the link to this study in the show notes, so anyone's listening can go find the study. Let's talk about for a few minutes just beyond the study. What's new at Google that you can talk about? There's probably a bunch of things that I'd have to tickle torture you to get you to admit to. So feel free to spill the beans on something like that. I think of voice. I think of the number of Google devices in my home. But for retailers, what's new that you could give a sneak peek to, or what's coming up for this year?
Well, I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 things that I would speak to that are specific and important to retail, and I think the first is around this notion of measurement. And so what we hear from retailers is help us better understand the impact of our digital channel. Help us understand the relationship between shoppers visiting our website, using our app, and actually what's occurring in the store. So we devote enormous time and resources to helping retailers close that measurement loop. We've invested in something called store visits, which is an approximation of how many people who see and click on ads physically visit stores. So we think that's been helpful. We've done some interesting work around e-receipts, where we are trying to tie together purchases in store with, again, people who are exposed to ads. And so, again, helping retailers trying to connect attribution, trying to attribute online ads to things that are occurring in store. So I think that really is the biggest question. I think many retailers with this study, or again, other things that they see going on with their business, understand that digital is important. We can help them understand just how important and create a little bit more urgency around that change. And I think measurement is a key part of the question. What's occurring in store, and also helping them understand sort of the life cycle of customers. A lot of retailers are trying to understand, how many new customers am I attracting? How many new people are we introducing to the brand who've never shopped with us before? Are people shopping with us online or in store once? And if they shop with us once, or are they introduced to the digital channel, are they coming back a second, third, and fourth time? And so we would talk about that in the context, we would call it lifetime value or future value. And so I think retailers are trying to understand the value of their customers, and it helps with measurement of the channels. It helps with product recommendations and all sorts of things. So I think measurement is sort of a key priority for us. We're spending a lot of time on sort of the insight side of retail. So, I'll give you an example. We've released something fairly new. We call it Merchant Analytics. And we're trying to help retailers beyond sort of the marketing side of the organization. What I mean by that is some people have described Google as like it's a database of intentions. And it's all anonymized, but through, Google searches, there's at the aggregate level, there's a really interesting understanding of like what people want to buy and where they want to buy it. And I think if you are a merchant or a buyer at a retailer, there's an opportunity for us to bubble up some of those insights. Can we help a retailer spot the next fidget spinner? Right? Or a grocer spot like the next Greek yogurt or celery juice, right? So products that like people weren't interested in before. Meat, beyond meat, right?
Trying to track the non-obvious before they become obvious, I guess.
Beyond meat's a great example. So sometimes Google offers a sneak peek into those insights, again at an anonymous and aggregate level, that can help retailers better understand these trends and make like buying decisions, store decisions based on those insights. So we're trying to like bubble up those insights at scale for a retailer, where a merchant could get a report and say like, hey, you sell vacuums. Here are like the 10 most popular vacuums in Canada. You sell 7 of them. You actually don't sell 3 of them. And here are 3 models that people are searching for that you don't sell. Other retailers sell them, and maybe you should stock them as well. So I think bubbling up those kinds of insights and helping retailers beyond, say, marketing, I think is a really important extension of what we can do to help retailers thrive in this digital age. And, I think the last area is sort of broader innovation. So I think Google's always been really helpful at, again, playing that sort of matchmaker role. We've got someone coming to Google looking for contact lenses. You sell contact lenses. We can help connect the shopper to the retailer. But I think we can play a bigger role in discovery and helping inspire shopping, and play like a more inspiring role in the discovery and shopping process. So I think there are
different
ways.
Place in the funnel, right?
A different place in the funnel. So, you may have seen some of these videos on YouTube. They're how-to videos. There are these like grocery haul videos where people are showing like what they've bought, unboxing videos, tips for, Father's Day gifts, and, all sorts of different shopping ideas. is I think like augmented reality and voice are like a couple really interesting areas of innovation where can we make shopping like more personalized, faster, and better? So, it's great that I can see like a picture of a sofa like on my phone and where to buy it, and the picture's like neat and I can like zoom in and that's great. But wouldn't it be better through the power of like a smartphone and the camera and all of this amazing technology now that I could like just look at it in my phone, point it at my living room, and see what that sofa looks like in my own space? And we think that's an example where we can reduce friction and make shopping better. It's better for shoppers. They're more likely to discover things they want to buy. It's better for retailers. It drives more qualified customers, can lower returns, right, as customers are more satisfied with the types of things that they want to buy.
Well, I'll look out in the mail then for my next set of Google glasses or appliances to help me.
You can do it all through a phone.
Yeah, the phone has kind of gazumped all that extra stuff. Well, listen, thanks for joining me on The Voice of Retail. How can retailers who don't already know of you get a hold of you?
Well, just send me an email. I'm at eMorris.
Google you, perhaps.
You can Google me.
Right?
You could Google me. eMorris at google.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can add me there. And happy to answer any and all questions. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, listen, Eric, thanks again for joining me. Great chat, and have you back on. There's always something interesting happening at Google, so it's great to keep up and keep track. So once again, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Jim, welcome to The Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Good. Michael, how are you?
Well, it's a real treat to speak with you. You and I have known each other as colleagues, and we've done work together. But if you could tell the folks listening a little bit about yourself and what your role is at Retail Council of Canada.
Sure. Well, I'm the Atlantic Director, based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but have responsibility for all of the 4 Atlantic provinces, so New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland and Labrador. And I've been on board for almost 8 years now. In August, it will be 1st of August. It'll be 8 years. So time has really flown by. Wow. As a one-person office handling all 4 provinces, I'm chief cook and bottle washer, handling everything from administrative duties up through to sitting down and meeting with premiers of provinces and federal cabinet ministers.
And what did you do with RCC 8 years? What did you do prior to arriving at Retail Council of Canada?
Well, not all, but most people that I find end up in these types of government relations type roles. I had a long stint in politics. I worked for 3 years federally on Parliament Hill in Ottawa for a member of Parliament in opposition, and that translated into an offer to come back home to work for the one of the former premiers in Nova Scotia and work in the premier's office out of Halifax. So did that for a number of years. Small stint working with a cabinet minister in Nova Scotia as well. And 9 years went by. I was working as a political hack for 9 years and loved every minute of it. But, obviously the hours are long. And when my wife and I had our first and only child, we made a conscious decision that it might be time to get into something that's a bit more reliable than working in politics.
And you said came back home. So born and raised in Nova Scotia in Halifax, or
born and raised, born in Halifax, like most children at the hospital here, but grew up in Amherst, Nova Scotia, which is the border town, the first town you come to in Nova Scotia when you enter from New Brunswick, and lived there for my entire youth, and then, of course, been living here in Halifax ever since 2002.
Well, fantastic. I didn't know that you had worked on Parliament Hill, so that's why I love doing these interviews, because no matter how long I've known people, I always learn something new and interesting. Let's turn our thoughts now to issues for retailers in the Atlantic provinces. So I've follow your work closely. I see discussions at the provincial level, at the most senior levels, and some of those discussions have been in and around, circling around, municipalities who are thinking about doing certain things. Let's get aligned and do them at the provincial level. But why don't you take me through what are the key issues for retailers who are based in or operating in the Atlantic provinces?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we try to focus on down here is, given the fact that all 4 Atlantic provinces are tiny in comparison to the rest of the country, we've had a real push down here, and we've had a fair amount of success in trying to get the provincial governments down here to think more regionally. At the risk of offending people from Atlantic Canada, myself being one, a lot of bigger businesses, in this case, bigger retailers that we represent, they look at the area not as 4 provinces as much as they look at it as one region. So, understanding that when it comes to regulatory red tape, when it comes to just their operational decisions that they make, they'll often look at the region as one. And, they may have 800 stores across Canada, but they look at it and say, well, I have 30 in Atlantic Canada. They don't break it down much further than that. So it's often been a challenge in trying to get governments to understand that, and of the need for them to work together. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel in small provinces when it doesn't have to happen. And to their credit, over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, under the leadership of Stephen McNeil, the Premier of Nova Scotia, we've been able to achieve a lot of regulatory harmonization, which has been great. My reason for mentioning that is that when it comes to environmental stewardship programs, that's probably the biggest issue that we're dealing with right now. We've been leaders down here in the country in recycling programs. Nova Scotia was one of the first back in the mid-90s to get into blue bag programs. The difference is that it was always taxpayer funded. And we've been late to the table in turning that over to extended producer responsibility outside of programs for electronics. So, we've been working hard on that over the last number of years as provincial governments and municipal solid waste commissions are growing tired of the costs involved, and they really see what's happening in other provinces where there are extended producer responsibility programs. So without getting into it too much, we're working hard with governments to help them understand, the do's and the don'ts of moving to a PPP program, understanding that, especially when it comes to municipal units, that 100% EPR might sound good to them in theory, but 100% EPR doesn't mean that they get to retain 100% of the influence and decision-making ability. So,
and when you say EPR, what does that stand for those?
Sorry, extended producer responsibility. So, basically, the years gone by where average Joe and Jane taxpayer pay through their taxes for the blue bag program to take your plastic junk, your containers, your paper, to take it all away from your home. Instead of it always being taxpayer funded, moving it to a model where saying, look, producers of these of the packaging, producers of the electronics, you're the ones that have created this product, and now that it's at the end of its useful life, you should be paying to help steward that product so it doesn't end up in landfill. Obviously in provinces like BC, Ontario, Quebec, others, they've moved ahead with fairly advanced programs in this regard, and Atlantic Canada is now moving in that direction. So we're just trying to make sure, and again, talking about harmonization, saying to the governments down here that we have best practices now across Canada in those provinces where they've stumbled and they've fixed things, they've moved ahead, they've learned from their mistakes. You don't need to recreate the wheel here in a small province like Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. Look at what they're doing. Our members, they know what the responsibilities and the expectations are for them. Do that, and we can adjust from there.
And the sustainability issues are really, I think I was reading an article around plastic bags, right? So that's another issue where municipalities try to get involved, but really it's I think your perspective as the Atlantic director is, let's just, as you've been saying, let's do it at the provincial level or even at the regional level so that we can reduce the operating costs and everyone can understand together and move together to get these initiatives done.
That's right. The plastic bags is the low-hanging fruit. Municipal units are looking for ways to reduce their costs and their responsibility on the environmental front by moving it over to industry. And PPP, printed paper packaging programs for, where it's the producer that's ultimately responsible. That's a lot to chew on for governments. And since we're not there yet, over the last couple of years, municipal units have taken the next step and said, well, let's look at the low-hanging fruit, which is plastic bags. It's interesting because in other parts of the country, plastic bags, it's not as big of an issue as it is here. And I think it's partly due to the fact that we have a marine environment. Sure. So we've been getting a lot of complaints over the last number of years from, environmental groups, obviously, but even down to just regular citizens of saying, we're tired of seeing plastic bags in our environment. We generally do a good job in stewarding these products municipally and through, industry action. But, whenever you see, especially in a marine environment, you see plastic in the ocean, you see those sad pictures of marine life with, plastic straws, plastic bags in their environment. It's difficult for our members, and therefore it's become a much bigger issue here. It's been something that's taken up a lot of our time in trying to understand where are we as an organization on this? How far do we push? What's considered a win on these issues? In certain provinces in the country, you can push back hard on this and say, look, there are existing recycling programs where plastic bags can go into a blue bag program. And that's enough for people. Down here, it's not. And, part of what they pay me to do is to help understand, to help influence government, influence the public, but also to understand where are the goalposts here and, what's a realistic win versus when do we need to cut our losses? And, when it came to the plastic bag issue, we found out very quickly that, especially at the municipal level, there were a lot of governments that they were tired of it. And regardless of any scientific evidence you put before them, they were bound and determined that they were going to ban the product.
Yeah. And then it becomes a task, which I think is probably a daily exercise for all of us of explaining the unintended consequences of different decisions, right? So, those groceries aren't getting home by themselves. Something has to move those groceries home.
Exactly.
And I guess, as I listened to you, a couple of thoughts. First of all, I think, if we were having this interview 7 years ago, we would probably not be, we'd be talking about very different issues, I suspect. This is, it really seems to be moved to the forefront of your agenda. Would you agree that it's, on a percentage of your time on, if we bundle it up as sustainability, recycling issues, these are taking up a greater percentage of your time, as an advocate and thinking about that on behalf of retail. Is that a fair assessment?
Certainly. Even 3 to 4 years ago, this was not really on the radar. The only time it would come up would be if a retailer was taking a proactive approach in, engaging in certain research or an initiative to take a voluntary effort to reduce their use of single-use plastic bags or to try out a different type of a bag. Right. Now it's coming very much from municipal governments, in some cases provincial governments, like we saw with Prince Edward Island, where they've passed, they're the only province in the country to have passed provincial legislation on this. And the plastic bag ban came into effect on July 1st of this year. But we're seeing a lot from municipal levels. Now, again, they have very little skin in the game, municipal politicians, on this, so it's easy pickings for them. It's an easy vote generator. That said, it's the interest from the general public on this is palpable. There have been a number of surveys done by municipal units that have shown that the general public, they want to see government lead more on this, and they want to see industry cooperate in getting rid of these plastic bags. So, it gets to a certain point.
As you say, those images of in the maritime, fish or whatever kind of foul in and around plastic bags really galvanizes the issue, I'm sure, and for all of us, but probably even more so, as you said, when you see that. Those unfortunate pictures, right? That really galvanizes both action and the political spectrum, right?
Yeah. Oh, look, it's the few studies that have been done on this around these parts. The government of Newfoundland did a study a few years ago, and they've shown that a lot of the plastic in the marine environment is not from the retail sector. It's not from single-use plastic bags. It's from plastic fishing gear. They use a lot more plastic product now than they used to, and that's being left in the ocean. It's coming from microbeads, things like that, right, that until recently were heavily used in makeup products and such. There's a lot more of that in the ocean environment than plastic bags, but again, you can't see microbeads. You don't often see the plastic fishing gear, but plastic bags are very noticeable. They're the pop bottles, right, from 40 years ago when there was a litter problem. So put a deposit on pop bottles because those were the most visible pieces of litter. Putting a deposit on those, did it solve the litter problem? No, but it did help move the issue forward. So, a lot of our members they've been very good on this. Here in Atlantic Canada, they understand the difference. And so, for the most part, our members have been very cooperative on this. And, they understand the need to, if we can't maintain the status quo, then look for solutions that will make this transition as easy as possible for our businesses, while at the same time not having a detrimental impact on customer service.
So, turning our mind from these sustainability, environmental issues, any other issues top of mind is opening store hours, because that's a little different in the Atlantic province, is Sunday shopping store hours. What are the top couple of other issues that come up most often for you?
Sure. Well, again, we put a lot of that under the harmonization between Atlantic provinces, red tape reduction. We've had some real wins down here, and they're not exactly of the sexy variety, but it's more piece by piece where we're making progress in things like harmonization of store hours when it comes to holidays, even down to working on things for some of our grocery members when it comes to their beverage containers, on trying to find harmonized beverage container exclusion policies, which we're working on through the various provinces. These are not things that you're going to sit up at night and go, wow, that's amazing stuff, but it all adds up. We have this Office of Regulatory Affairs and Service Effectiveness based out of Halifax. It's been doing amazing work, and what they've been doing is they've been working to try and get duplicates in the other provinces. They're starting to get some success there, where there's now dedicated staff in New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island. We're working on Newfoundland, where when you're looking at the piece by piece regulatory harmonization they're doing, it's now starting to add up into real dollars for retailers or those that work for retailers. Transportation, common practices regarding weights with the 18-wheelers on the various roadways, their logbook information. It all sounds very tiny, but when most of the retail product gets trucked into Atlantic Canada, it really does add up after a while. So we're seeing a lot of good work there, where we've been working hand in hand with government. Minimum wage, obviously, we're almost there in creating a harmonized Atlantic-wide system for determining minimum wage. And of course, that has a huge impact on retailers, where a lot of them have salary scales. So, any irresponsible political decisions on the minimum wage front, they have an impact throughout the salary scale of a retailer. Workers' compensation rates, New Brunswick for the last 3 years was the problem child of Canada on this. And after screaming and fighting with them, along with other industry associations for 3 years, we finally got a fix when the new government was elected last fall. We went from a 3-year period where workers' comp rates in New Brunswick were increasing upwards of 60% a year. It was absolutely bizarre. Due to bad legislation that the government of the day refused to fix. All of a sudden that was fixed, and you're starting to see rates going back to a reasonable level. These are all things that we work on daily on behalf of our members, and sometimes they don't see what we're doing, but they all really do have an impact at the end of the day to a retailer's bottom line and their ability to compete.
Well, it's great. I mean, it sounds like the cumulative effect of a lot of small things, but they all add up, as you say, to helping reduce operating costs and efficiencies, and that can only add up to, so to speak, better value for the customers at the end of the day, right? So,
yeah.
Well, listen, it's been great catching up with you, Jim. How, if members who are listening to this and want to get in touch with you, have some questions about their operations at Atlantic Canada, or want to reach out, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure, they can always call at 902-422-4144, or they can email me, jcormier@retailcouncil.org.
Well, fantastic. Listen, love to have you back on later in the year. We'll continue to catch up and stay informed with what's happening in our lovely Atlantic provinces. Until then, I wish you a wonderful weekend ahead, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
You as well. Thanks, Mike. Well,
all right. Thanks to Eric and Jim for being my guests this week. And now let's hit the highlights from Retail This Week, newsletter, biggest retail weekly in Canada. You can subscribe on retailcouncil.org for free. I put that together each and every week, 51 weeks of the year, curating the top stories from Canada and around the world, kicking it off with Metro. Metro fast tracks tech deployment to boost productivity and profits. So Metro came out with some good results this week. Eric LeBlanc, CEO Eric LeBlanc, talking about how in the conference call that releasing and accelerating tech was important from a productivity perspective. Customers were enjoying it. We're thinking of lots of, I'm sure, behind the scenes, back of the house technology, but also front of the house with self-checkout. My local Metro also just put in a nice self-checkout, and I enjoy buying or picking up a can of beer, very civilized, and going through the self-checkout. We'll talk about how beer and alcohol is making its way more and more into retail stores here in Ontario. Congratulations to this from Canadian Business, by the way. Congratulations to Metro. From Strategy Magazine, IKEA Canada constructs a brand for the future. So it's a great article talking about how IKEA Canada is focused on making changes, everything from moving to digital versus mailing out their bulk catalogs, brand partnerships, in store events, really customizing as IKEA does their offering, even though the product assortment and naming, it tends to be generic. There are customizations that they do for each and every market. I mean, think of electric-powered delivery vehicles in India, and serving up vegetarian food in India. So, just top of mind. Anyway, good article from Strategy Magazine. From Retail Insider, Mark's great Canadian Tire division run by marketing run by the great David Louis, is rolling out a new mall concept store. So this is easier seen than described. So be sure and check that out in Retail Insider. But it's really everything, the walls, color. It's a quote from the folks there. Wall, color, finish, everything looks completely different. Really, it's a great look for that retailer. A couple of videos to call out. There's a good interview with Canada Goose CEO. We're full steam ahead on China. That from BNN. And from RCC's very own president and CEO, Diane Brisebois, who was visiting members in Winnipeg, went on television just talking about the issues facing retailers in Winnipeg and Manitoba, operating in or based in, and how important it was to get those issues in front of the politicians with an election coming up this fall. Also, we've got the federal little note here. The Federal Competition Bureau endorses provincial government's liberalized booze plans. From the Star, something Retail Council of Canada has been working on to liberalize sales of beer and alcohol and spirits eventually in and outside to retailers. Walmart expands Instacart grocery delivery. So this is a big step forward for Walmart using Instacart. They're now moving, they did some pilots, Toronto and Winnipeg, and now the service is available at 200 stores across Canada with a wide assortment. I was just checking the assortment's kind of nice service, out into the far-flung places, including university towns like London, Ontario. And what else? So moving on, Retail on the Week. There's some buzz around Nike launching a subscription service for kids' shoes, the Nike Adventure Club. It's kind of neat. I mean, what's I think is kind of fun with it, they ship out a prepaid bag. Parents can send back their kids' worn shoes, which will be either donated or through the Nike Grind program that takes the shoes apart and then recycles them. So nice initiative there. Interesting to see Nike get into that. Article on Dean DeLuca and Barney's from New York. If you're a frequent or infrequent visitor to New York, you've probably been in both those places. They've seen brighter days. Dean DeLuca is probably on his last minutes, and Barney's is shutting down half their stores. As these things go, smaller doesn't make them better. Better makes them better. So we'll see We wish them luck, but we'll see what happens with Barney's. Whole Foods CEO on life with Amazon. It's like marriage. I love them 98% of the time. It's kind of a funny John McKay article. It's just a funny thing to say, particularly he's pictured with his wife standing beside him. It's like, yeah, 2% of that time. Anyway, if you want a bit more background, that's from CNBC. But if you want a bit more background on that at length, check out a prior episode of Retail, The Voice of Retail, where I interviewed Whole Foods co-CEO, former Whole Foods co-CEO Walter Robb, live on the stage from store. It's a great interview. He's very engaging, and be sure and listen to that a couple of episodes ago. Amazon getting into the liquor store business. Speaking of liquor stores, looks like they're doing that in San Francisco. I mean, that must be, or maybe just part of Prime Delivery. I'm not sure they're terribly interested really in getting into the alcohol, spirits, and wine business, though they're interested in every business, so that could be a focus for them as well. That from Business Insider. H&M, Zara are closing stores to get ahead. So this is one of those less is not better, better is better. So they're really closing stores with a purpose, both H&M and Zara, and that purpose is they're a bit behind really in e-commerce, and they're really trimming their physical network and throwing those resources into online sales. We see other retailers doing that. Hudson's Bay, for example, selling off real estate to WeWork, which had an interesting week in and of itself, if you want to read through bizarre financial statements. And putting those dollars, I think Hudson's Bay earned about $900 million and put that into digital. So good reallocation of resources. Retail news for entrepreneurs. OK Tire Store talking about their great franchisees. Great leadership out west at OK Tire. So we wish them all the best. One of my local malls from Ottawa, Lincoln Fields, finally shutting down. RioCan converting that into a mixed property, but it's kind of tough on the small retailers who've been there for a long, long time. Focus on retail sustainability. I skipped one. Nipissing First Nations granted a retail cannabis license. So every now and then I continue to put these in because more and more places are getting retail cannabis licenses across the country as supply starts to open up. Not seeing that kind of activity yet in Ontario, so we can only wish for the best beyond or including or beyond the 50 that are coming this year, but we hope for that to expand dramatically. Back to retail sustainability, Waitrose, Bring Your Own Containers campaign. Described here as an anti-plastic scheme. We've seen Metro, Loblaw. We've all seen them begin. I mean, Whole Foods, you have a container. I'm not sure you can bring your own container, but certainly in Metro, Whole Foods, many of the grocers getting into this as it's becoming popular with consumers. Wegmans cuts 2 million pounds of in-store plastics this year, so they're cutting a whole bunch of plastics material from and replacing it with plant-based renewable fibers. New provincial report recommends having producers pay the full cost of Blue Box. So this is a big deal, and overall a program that's not entirely well understood, the Blue Boxes that are at your doorsteps for recycling. And RCC, Retail Council of Canada, along with Canadian Beverage Association, Consumer Products, FCPC, have supported a mediation that really has that cost shift to producers versus municipalities, run by municipalities. So it's a complex issue, so I won't do it justice here, but be sure and read this article. Many articles coming out this week because this is just this is New Observer Extra from Waterloo. But it's one of those programs that's at your doorstep that's not well understood by consumers, but is a tremendous cost to be managed. There's lots of things going on in sustainability and Blue Box programs. So right now it's 50-50 with municipalities and source and retailers. So that's going to transition. And we'll see all kinds of interesting things happen for that. So we'll no doubt be talking about that soon in a future podcast. And if you want to go for more information on that, check out Retail Council of Canada's website at retailcouncil.org. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc., and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.